How is the school financed? Is it only by tuition or also by public funds?
No, the Sudbury Valley School is financed entirely by tuition.
Greenwood is a private school and is tuition funded, so the state leaves us alone and lets us be able to do these.
How is your school financed?
Completely by the parents and by donations. We, as we said, have no support from the government.
Where do you get your money from?
Tuition. We're tuition supported. We have Sudbury Valley makes a real point of being completely tuition supported because they want to have complete autonomy and they want only to be accountable to the families who are at the school and not to a grant organization and not to public, to the government. And we have been a little bit different from that in that when we built our buildings, we raised money for those improvements. But for the operating expenses, the ongoing daily operating expenses, we only use tuition to support that.
100% of our money comes from private tuition. Now our tuition is only half of the cost of the tuition of the next highest school in the area, so it's very, very inexpensive.
And our tuition is about $6,000 a year, which is higher than some of the other Sudbury schools. But our assembly has voted to raise the tuition so that our staff could be paid a wage that you can support a family on.
And if you put it into perspective as well with the other private schools in the area, only the church-run schools are less than we are. It's not unusual for students in the area to be parents to be paying $15,000 to $22,000 for a private school. So we're a pretty good deal.
And we intentionally keep the tuition as low as we possibly can to try to make the school available to anybody, and we don't want it to be just exclusively to the upper class or the upper middle class. We want to make sure that it's available to working families as well.
What a lot of Sudbury schools do is they base it on what it would cost if we were paying out of pocket to send our child to public school, like what it costs per child. Ours is $3,500, which is actually pretty inexpensive. It's about half the price of the private schools in the area. One of the reasons why I chose it initially is because we could afford it. I also sort of figured it out, like the schools are open from 9 to 5 p.m. Most schools, the public schools might be free, but they charge for an after-school care program. When you look at the cost of tuition for our school, it's actually not that much more than if I had her in an after-school care program till 5.
Whether you are a single parent having a child with minimum wage or you're a single parent child having multi-million dollars, both should be able to come to the school.
There are some very, very, very poor families that stuck with the school, and if they can't afford it, then we really try to give them as much of a scholarship as possible. Some families that have more than one student have 1 or 2 complete scholarships. We want our students, but we're hoping that it won't be a problem, that people use that as a claim against us in Israel, but we don't think it's true.
We really want to have a school that's as diverse as possible. That's been one of our big struggles, I think.
So if somebody can't afford to send his or her child to Sudbury Valley School, is there any possibility that it can go to Sudbury Valley? Is there anything like a scholarship?
We have something called the Emergency Tuition Loan Fund that was started probably 7 or 8 or 10 years ago. And the purpose of that fund is to allow a student that's already been attending the school to continue to attend the school if his family should have some kind of financial hardship. And that they would get a loan from the fund for their tuition, and that the parents wouldn't have to pay back the loan, or they wouldn't have to pay back the loan until after some years after they had left. But that's all that we have in terms of financial aid.
I don't feel the parents should pay for this kind of education. That means either you look for grants or you make it a sliding scale, which I'm for. That parents who can afford to pay, please pay. And parents who can't afford to pay, that doesn't mean the door is shut to the school. The door should be open to the school.
And we do everything we can to help families come to the school who want to go to the school, so that if they're saying that money is the issue, we have some financial aid available. We have a reduced tuition for people who would typically qualify for a free lunch program here in the public schools.
And I'm trying to get the school to do sliding scale tuition. But it's difficult. It's a long journey. Maybe in 5 years we may be able to make it a sliding scale so everybody can come, all people can come.
We don't have anything like that. For us, it's been, the problem there has been to determine, trying to determine the financial means of families is a problem that we haven't ever wanted to get into. I mean, just for example, you may have a family that has a large income, but they may have expenses that are hard to take into account. They may have a sick relative that they're caring for. That there are many intangible conditions that affect how much money a family has and what their ability is to pay for anything in particular. And that where one family may make do with a very old car or with just one car, and therefore has a certain amount of money available, another family may decide that they need new cars, and therefore say, well, we don't have the money to send our kids to school.
It's one of the reasons why this school doesn't grow bigger than it does, because I think the people, a large portion of people that we could serve may be a little bit uncomfortable in public school, but when they look at spending any money, it doesn't seem worth it to them.
And that over the years we've seen families who really wanted their kids to be at Sudbury Valley figure out how to make the sacrifices that are necessary in order to be able to pay the tuition. And to me, it's kind of hard to honor that sacrifice and commitment on one hand, and to subsidize, someone else on the other hand. It's a difficult question, but our approach to it has been to do everything we can to keep the tuition low, and to try and have everybody pay the same amount.
It's not so much that people can't afford it, but they wouldn't make the choice unless they were suffering.
One of the factors that we took into account when we talked about tuition is how much money could a 16-year-old reasonably make in a year at a part-time job, if it was important for them to attend the school.
It is true that some families just couldn't send their kid to the school because they couldn't afford any tuition, and it's very hard to get a full tuition. I think the only time that a student from a single family, that was the only student from that family, I think the only time that such a student got a full tuition was when there's actual fundraising for their full tuition. It's not simple, and because of that, some families just don't send their kid because they can't afford it, and they wait for us to be able to lower the scholarships they could come.
I think if we could, we would give as much as possible, but we are so poor and we have such a small building. We're growing. If we were doing better, I think we'd definitely make it a lot easier for people to come, lower the tuition by a substantial amount, but right now we can't.